episode of Mindfulness with Mark Bianchi, with the little dollar signs for the S's. I'm happy you could join me here today. And today we're going to be talking about those creative ways that you can save money, those creative ways to cut your expenses. Because we know that so many people today are living paycheck to paycheck. In fact, through my little bit of research that I did, I found out that approximately 78% of people live paycheck to paycheck. And I'm relatively certain that during these times right now that number has probably grown, I would imagine. But 78%, that means that they're are one paycheck, possibly two paychecks away from really, catastrophic things happening in their lives. And that's just not a good situation. So much of that during this time right now has been out of our control. We can't help it if we get laid off. We can't help it if we get furloughed. But the thing that my show that I try to focus on is focusing on what it is that we can control. And a lot of times with our expenses, that saying to make hay while the sun shines, it's better to be preventive about a lot of these things. And when you are young, when you are middle-aged or whatever, making decent money, or even not so decent money. But there are some creative ways that we don't always think about. I think that we often think in terms of the big hits when it comes to saving money, and I'll give you some examples of those. Some of the big hits that are always talked about are, can you save money on your mortgage payment by making an extra payment a year? Of course, that requires you being employed and gainfully employed and having a house and all that. But if you are and you do that, we all know that over the long haul, that's one of those long haul savings things that will save you money in the long run, and you'll have it paid off. You'll be saving on interest payments. You may not then end up paying, $600,000 for your $300,000 house. You might only pay $375,000 or $400,000 for that house, which is a savings, because if you stretch it out over 30 years, that's a big savings. And you paid it off in 21 or 22 or 25 years. All that interest is that you never paid it, so you are ahead of the game. The other very common one that people focus on is credit card debt, and just the unnecessary debt in our lives, and focusing on paying that off as quickly as possible, or limiting its usage as much as possible as well. So those are the very, very common ones, but there are much more subtle ways that we can streamline our money and save. And some of them are what I call creative ways. And that's the subject of today's show, creative ways to cut your expenses, to cut your living expenses. Some you may have thought of, some you might think are out of your realm of even fathoming that you'd be able to do that. However, I want to go over some of the ones that I actually have real life experience living some of these, a lot of these, and also I want to share with you. It's kind of funny because before I even get started, one of the things I want to talk about is a joke that I have made many times to a lot of friends, and I always say that in my 20s and my 30s, it was all about going to the clubs and that kind of stuff that a lot of us in our 20s and 30s are kind of obsessed with, let's face it. Don't know about today, because I don't know a ton of people in their 20s and 30s anymore. But I know, like, back in my day, a lot of people of my generation were, it was all about the clubs. And the joke that I frequently make is, if only I had all of the money that I spent on cigarettes, booze, and cover charges, and I had invested that for even half of that, all of those years and all of those months of those years, in a nice little, mutual fund or something like that, something similar, I would be so ahead of the game right now. And I think, a lot of us could say that. If I think about the value proposition of what doing all of that for all of those years really, really added to my life versus what having that invested would have added to my life now. Um, it's kind of one of those things where you end up kicking yourself in the pants saying, what was I thinking? Um, but you live and you learn. And that's just one example. You know, and I don't even know if today's generation is as much into the club scene or anything like that, like they were years ago. I don't know if, the digitization of America has changed that. I'm not even sure. I just know that back in my day, in the 90s when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, um, I know it sure was popular. And so, of course, in the 80s. So, don't make that mistake. Or, by all means, go out and have some fun, but, don't do it at the exclusion of completely ignoring a future nest egg or whatever. And because in the long run, ask yourself if it really adds to your life. And, those are, I think, some of those live and learn regret type issues that I think we all deal with. And we get wiser as we get older, hopefully. Maybe not everybody. I hope that I am as I'm getting older. But what I wanted to talk about are those often overlooked, and you rarely will hear, even financial coach type people like me. I don't know if they necessarily talk about these types of things, and I don't know if you'll ever get this advice from a financial advisor or a planner or, consultant or anything like that. But they're often overlooked ways that you can really save on expenses. And I'm going to jump right in and say, being a homeowner since I've been in my early 30s, one of the things that you can majorly save money on are repair bills. How do we do that? So, Mark, how do you do that if you're not the least bit handy and you have no idea, how to fix that pool pump on your pool filter, for instance, or, I've never touched my AC unit. I have no idea, how to change the filter. I have to call a guy, or, how do I put Clorox down that drain so it doesn't back up and all that? So those are all things that, you can look up. You can look it up on YouTube. Thank God we live in the information age, because 30 years ago, you kind of had to ask a friend or somebody who you knew was handy to maybe show you. I was lucky. I had my father, who was pretty handy his whole life, and showed me a lot of stuff. And then I kind of built on it from there by just taking stuff apart. And usually you end up just putting it back together the same way that you took it apart. So for me, and thankfully today, if you do something like that, you have your phone right there. So if you took something apart and you want to make sure you remember how to put it back together again, you just snap a picture of it, and it's right there for posterity. And then you can refer to that, and you could always put it back together, make it look exactly like you took it apart. So what I wanted to say is I wanted to give some examples of the practical everyday things that we all can do and that I have done. And I'm going to give examples of what I have done, where I have saved money that a lot of people wouldn't think to do, because, we've got these busy lives, and it's often so much more convenient. Well, it is. It actually is much more convenient to just bring it to a guy or call a guy or a girl. I want to make sure I'm equal gendered there. So to call somebody and have them, come to the house to fix something, or to take it to a mechanic, or whatever, take a car to a mechanic. There is definitely a convenience factor to be considered there. And that's to say there is a price, though, that is associated with that convenience. I'll give you a small example. So I used to have a 2004 Honda Accord, which I drove for 15 years. And when you hold on to a car for a while, things will break down. So I had the gear shift lever, that the thing that you push in like this to go from reverse to drive to neutral to park, that thing that was in the middle, it was an automatic, it was not a stick shift. So that little lever snapped, and I could no longer go from park to reverse or whatever. So I started Googling. Google is our friend. And when I looked it up, I found out that that's a very common thing that breaks, and especially in a very hot climate like I live in here in South Florida. There's plastic pieces. A lot of things are just made with plastic anymore that used to be made with metal and more substantial material. In the past, it's plastic now. And there's drawbacks to that, of course. I'm imagining it's cheaper for manufacturers. However, it also can lead to things like breakdowns. And there's a plastic piece in there that gets so hot because of the internal car temperature. And if you live in a hot climate where the inside of your car gets up to around 140 degrees in about 30 seconds in the sun, when you're parked in the sun, those things can easily melt. And so I looked it up because I had to do something pretty fast, because it was either I get my car towed to the dealer, which of course, how inexpensive that is. And then I take it to the dealership, and you also know how inexpensive that is. I'm being sarcastic, of course. So basically what I did is I looked up on YouTube, is this a common thing that breaks? And I found out it is a relatively common thing that breaks in Honda Accords, relatively common. And my experience was that it had broken on me, and I could feel that it was starting to break for quite a while. And then I got to the point where, okay, I've really, I'm stuck now. So I need to do something quickly. And so luckily I didn't have to go anywhere for 3 or 4 days. So I was kind of stranded. But however, I did look up, and I found a website where this part was available. And then I also found a YouTube video which showed me what part I needed to order. And then once I received that part, how to put it in. And it was just like a little kind of plastic contraption thing that goes inside that thing that you grab and push in like this to go to make your transmission thing, your gear shift thing move. And the part costs $29 for me to buy and have it shipped to my house. And I got it in like 2 days. That was like rush delivery too, because it was actually, the place was located in Florida. And so it did not take very long for me to get it. I called them and ordered it and told them the year and make and model of the car, what I needed. And as soon as I got it, I watched the YouTube video a couple of times. I actually brought my phone into the car with me and watched the video. And the end of the story is it was not that difficult at all to fix that. And I ended up spending $29 on something that would have cost me, God knows, 150, 200, I mean, what do you get charged? $175 just for the first diagnosis. And then it's like, I don't know, 150, 200 an hour for labor thereafter, 125. I'm not even sure what they charge nowadays. But if you can figure out how to fix something on your own, and I must put a big disclaimer out there, okay? If this is not something you're comfortable doing, if you really do not trust your abilities to fix something like that, I would not recommend doing that. However, if you are the adventurous type and you feel like you have that handyman or handy woman type ability, then by all means, Google is your friend, YouTube is your friend. And if you ever check out YouTube for just about anything that you need, that you want to look up on how to fix, how to repair something, it's on there. Just about anything that you want to look up. So, but I do have that disclaimer out there that if you're not comfortable doing something like that, by all means, call an expert or call a relative or a friend that is very mechanical or something like that. There's not a lot of things I will tackle on a car, but I know a lot of people who do their own oil changes and people who know how to change a battery. I'm not quite that skilled, but there are little things that I'm not afraid to tackle when it comes to a car. And that little gear shift thing was one of them. That's just one example. So the other thing was just general house improvements, ones that don't need to be permitted, et cetera, like flooring, for instance, or painting or doing baseboards, something like that. Not hard to look up if you need a tutorial. Also, a lot of the places where you buy things like flooring will give you tutorials. The men or women that work there are very helpful in as far as telling you, instructing you, giving you basic instructions. I know some of the big box do-it-yourself stores offer classes all the time. Places like Home Depot and Lowe's, they offer classes all the time on how to, tile a floor, how to hang a cabinet, things like that. So it's not completely out of the realm of your possibility that you don't have to pay somebody an exorbitant amount of money to come to your house and fix something or do something for you. There are ways to learn if you are so inclined, and I must put that out there, if you are so inclined. I'm not making a blanket generalization that absolutely everybody out there should go and figure out how to do all this stuff. If you are so inclined though, and you consider yourself handy, and you're adventurous enough to give it a try, go ahead and give it a try, because in the long run, you will save a lot of money. For instance, when I laid my engineered wood floor in the house that goes right over the tile, I saved approximately $3,000 just in the labor costs alone of having that done. Is it a little bit time consuming? Yes. Did I make a few mistakes as I got started? Yes. However, and maybe I will post some of these to my page and share them during our next one. I'll take some good pictures and share them out because the end results of the floor look fantastic. And at the same time, I upgraded my house, and I also saved a ton of money on the installation. The other thing that I did, which took me probably 2 to 3 months, rather than buying brand new kitchen cabinets, I refaced all of my kitchen cabinets myself. I went to Lowe's and I started asking some questions, and there's a cabinet paint out there called, I think, Cabinet Magic. And I've always loved white kitchens, and it's a white paint that goes right over the mica, and it's self-priming and all this kind of stuff. And it looked beautiful. And I also built the shaker style wood to go around the face of the cabinets, also which I could post a picture of next time, and I'll share that. And also I'll share that to the Enlightened World Network and Enlightened Living channels, so people can figure out. And I don't consider myself, the funny thing is, I don't consider myself tremendously handy, but I think in retrospect, I probably am a little bit better than average, but I wasn't always. And that's the important thing to remember. When I was a new homeowner, I did not know how to do a lot of this stuff, and I learned through trial and error. One of the things I'll never mess with is electric, because anything that can zap me and kill me instantly, I'm not into that. So I do have a great electrician that I know and love, and he's great, and he's reasonable, and he does great work. So yeah, so there's that. There's things that I will mess with, and there's things that I won't. I did replace my pool motor. I had it refurbished at the pool store, my pool motor. Instead of buying a brand new one, which is around, and having it installed, which would be like around $750, $1,000. It's 3 wires. And that was one electric thing I was not afraid to do. And that's because I knew where to turn it off at the breaker box. That's very, very important to do that, number one. And I will not mess with electric. I really will not, but this was an exception. And I just saw there were 2 wires in the ground, and I turned it off at the breaker box, and I did it myself. I'm not recommending everybody do that. I'm probably a little bit more adventurous than most. However, I probably saved myself $750 in an installation of the brand new filter motor, pool filter motor. So there are ways to do that. Let me see what else I wrote down here. So yeah, with those kitchen cabinets, I wanted to mention I probably saved myself $5,000 to $7,000 in kitchen cabinet costs, and they look fantastic. And unless you're one of those micro analyzing people that comes through somebody's house with a magnifying glass on a microscope. You know, we have all watched HGTV and we know how some people act when they go in homes. That's incredibly annoying. But by the way, it's not that hard to do something like that, and you save a ton of money. And I'm one of those people, I don't mind getting my hands dirty. I don't mind digging in and figuring it out. And if it becomes too much, I'll call somebody. You know, if I like took it apart and I'm like, oh, there's no way I can do this, then I'll call somebody, and it's not the end of the world. But at least I gave it a try. So I'm never afraid to do that. I maintain my own AC unit. You know, we can all do that. You know, there's a lot of the damage that happens to floors in houses is caused because AC units back up. And a lot of the units, the newer units, will have an automatic shutoff that if you get a clog, the water stops draining because it shuts the unit off, and that's good. But the older units don't necessarily have that, and you need to keep those drains cleaned. And if you never put Clorox down those drains and you don't know how to do that, have a friend or somebody show you that, because it's a really inexpensive, total preventive way to prevent those leaks from happening. Once you have a clog, you probably have to have somebody come in and blows it through the line and blows the algae that builds up through that line and blows it down the drain. I have even done that where I got a long tube that was about 3 feet long, a flexible like rubber tube, and I placed that inside the white PVC that goes down to the drain behind the AC unit, and I just I just blew through that. Like I held my breath and I blew through that and blew all of the algae out of my thing, and it came up in the sink in the other room. It was really kind of funny because that was a way that I got creative, and I didn't have to call somebody to clear out my drain. But the thing with that is, to prevent that from happening, you have to put Clorox down that drain once in a while. And if you're not comfortable just taking your thing apart and figuring out where that Clorox goes, have a friend show you exactly where it is, or call an AC guy and watch what he does. A lot of times, if I don't know how to do something for the first time, I'll call somebody and have them do it. And I watch them, and I just chit chat. I pretend I'm just chit chatting with them, which I am, but I'm also observing exactly what they're doing. So the next time I don't have to call them, I'll do it myself. And a lot of times, somebody comes in and they're here for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and it's $150, service call or more. Who knows? Some people believe in those home warranties. I've never had one. Because I know how to maintain a lot of my things, like refrigerators, for instance. A lot of people don't know you're supposed to clean those coils every once in a blue moon, because especially if you have pets or a dusty house, those coils get dirty, and you're supposed to vacuum underneath there. I would find little balls of fur from my little fur ball, who passed away, unfortunately, but she was a shedder. And a lot of that hair would end up in the back of the refrigerator. And I would go in there with the extension, the attachment. I would unplug it just to be safe. Always unplug something before, just to be safe. But I would go in and just vacuum the hair away and just the dust away, and even underneath the refrigerator, just to make sure it always has an airflow. So there's little preventative things you can do. I bet nobody ever thought this would turn into a home ec show, right? But I don't know how you can talk about expense management and mindfulness with your money without talking about some of the creative ways that you can save money. And I think if you go out and if you ever did a survey of a lot of homeowners, I think you would probably find a lot of commonality with what I'm saying right now, is that a lot of people, have struggled to pay a mortgage or to stay afloat in their house, because I consider a house one of those great investments that, it was worth the sacrifices of learning how to fix a lot of these things, or foregoing that vacation or whatever, to keep the house in good order, because I knew one day it would be worth quite a bit more than what I paid for it. And so that's all good. So it's all about, if you notice the common trend that I always talk about in these shows, it's about looking at the bigger picture and sometimes breaking apart your day-to-day to see the moving smaller pieces, but seeing how they relate to the overall bigger picture and, where you see yourself 25, 30, 35 years from now. Chances are most of us with modern medicine and everything like that, and we eat, if you eat well and you do those preventive type things, which I'm kind of getting a little bit into my next point, most of us are going to live pretty long. Most of us are, if you take relatively decent care of us, unless you have some, genes always play a part. Some things you can control, there's some things you can't control. My whole show is about the things you can control, and house expenses and preventative, keeping yourself healthy, sleeping right, not smoking, not drinking. Nobody needs to be a doctor to know that, that smoking and overindulging in alcohol is not the best thing for you in the long haul. So those little preventative things, you can actually make the argument that they could save you money someday in medical bills. Medical debt is terrible in this country. It's one of the biggest reasons that people end up declaring bankruptcy. So anything that could help you avoid those terrible medical bills one day. And one of the biggest things with that is, is just watching your lifestyle, trying to be a healthier person. I don't think anybody can argue that lifestyle choices play a role. You can Google that. I think in some 70 or more percent of diseases that people end up getting are lifestyle related. And check with your doctor, discuss it with your doctor. But I can't imagine most of us always, check with your doctor before you, make any changes in your life. Of course, I'll put that out there. But, sleeping right and eating right, I don't think, anybody would argue that those are two great things to do for all of us that could, possibly, not saying definitely, but possibly, not, lead to medical debt in your future. So again, I would highly recommend that you're very honest with yourself with all of those things that I mentioned with the home repairs and stuff like that. Make sure that you're capable of doing that you're handy enough, that you've read materials or that you've YouTubed and you're very, very confident before you embark on something like that. Or talk it over with a friend, or get a friend to help you, somebody that who is more handy and all that kind of stuff. But I found from owning a house at a very young age that all of those things help. So let's see. So just, prevention in general, medical, any kind of health type thing, taking care of yourself is huge, I believe, as well. The next really big topic that I think is something that we don't talk about, and that you'll be hard pressed to probably find a financial coach out there that's going to talk to you about these things. But I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about these things, and probably, and what I'm talking about is home economics. Home economics is a skill set that has kind of gone by the wayside. When I was a kid, you had a lot of schools that offered a class in home economics, how to manage your budget in your house, how to cook a meal, how to make something from scratch, food safety, not keeping stuff past its expiration date, not keeping, chicken in the refrigerator for a month, little things like that we are often overlooked today, used to be taught. But where I'm going to take it is just on the basic cost savings from preparing your own meals versus going out to eat or ordering boxed food. So some things that I wrote down here that are interesting are a restaurant delivered meal is probably the most expensive way to feed yourself or your family, because it averages, depending on what the food is, it averages around $20 per serving to have restaurant food delivered to your house. And it's by far the most expensive choice when it comes to eating and feeding your family. It is almost 3 times as expensive as a meal kit. So those meal kits are very popular now because people don't want to look up recipes and they want it sent to them, and everything is about convenience. So if you notice the trend here, how convenience often leads to expensive, that's the connection I'm trying to point out here. That for convenience sake, you're often paying interest, you're paying debt, you're paying, if you're buying it on a credit card, for that convenience, you're charging it a lot of times. Okay, because it's, we're going more and more cashless all the time, let's face it. So you're either, you're probably charging it. And so for that convenience of not wanting to take those extra few hours and squeezing it into your schedule to prepare some from scratch meals, you are paying approximately 5 times more. It's approximately 5 times as expensive to order one of those, or have food delivered to your house already made for you from a restaurant versus cooking it from scratch. 5 times. That means that if you paid $20 a serving, you could average $4 a serving for that same meal if you learned to cook it from scratch. And I'm going to also talk about, and I'll post it to the Enlightened World Network and the Enlightened Living channels, I'm going to post some recipes and some ideas on how you can stretch those food dollars even more, because I even think that the $4 is on the high end, because I know that I can go and buy some ingredients and make them last for 3 to 4 meals. And interesting meals, not like eating the exact same thing 3-4 days in a row. I'm talking about you'll feel like you're eating a different meal every day, but it's from the same 5 or 6 ingredients that you bought at the grocery store. So yes, 5 times more than making it from scratch is buying something that's restaurant made and delivered to your house. The next least expensive way is the meal kit. That's approximately 3 times as expensive as making it from scratch. A better deal than the already made meal from the restaurant, however, still pretty expensive. So I just want people to realize that if you know anything about restaurants and how they operate, and I'm not against restaurants, okay, by any means, okay? It's lovely to go out and eat and have a nice meal every once in a while. However, if you're doing it every single day and your thought process is, why can't I save any money? I'm telling you that you're spending way, way, way more money than you need to be. And you could be saving a lot more money. And I know some people say, oh, but I live by myself. I don't like to cook and I hate to cook for myself. But you will save so much more money and you'll have more disposable income. You will, absolutely. And cooking does not have to always be a time-consuming project. Everybody thinks, oh, I don't have time to spend 5-6 hours standing in my kitchen, slicing and dicing vegetables and all this kind of stuff. Well, it's true, like it might take some time to prep the materials, but really, honestly, how long does it take to cut up some celery, carrots, and onions and put it in a bowl? 5 minutes? And if anybody has ever used a crock pot, I call it passive cooking. Just like there's active and passive of investing, there's active and passive cooking. You can say, if you've ever used a slow cooker crock pot, you throw your ingredients in there, you put the lid on, you put it on the extreme low setting that's so low it barely boils and it simmers, and you can leave it. You leave it there for 8-9 hours and you come back and it's ready. A lot of people do that. They go to work, they put stuff in their crock pot. By the time they come back from work, their meals are ready and it's already inside your crock pot. You have a stew. You put some beef, some onions, celery, carrots, and some potatoes, slice up some potatoes and throw it in, throw a couple of containers of beef broth together, salt and pepper, a bay leaf. There you go. I just gave you the recipe for 2 days worth of beef stew. And if you think that you could get 4 meals at a restaurant for as cheap as you can make that one beef stew, that beef pot roast, what does it cost? About $10 to get a nice big, 1 pound piece of meat, 1.5 pounds pot roast, 10, 12, $14 maybe at the most, and some vegetables, get the fresh vegetables, and some peas and some lima beans and throw it all together. What are we talking? Another $5 to $6. And then the beef broth and a couple of bay leaves. I think if entire thing, if that entire list of ingredients cost you $18, I'd be surprised. Especially being that you're not using all of the celery at once, you're not using all of the onion at once, you're not using all of the carrots at once. You know, you'll get probably 4 uses out of one big long stalk of celery. So you can't count the entire stalk of celery as your food cost to make that item. You'd have to count it as whatever percentage of that big stalk of celery that you use. So if that big stalk of celery is, I'm just throwing this out there, $2.50, and you used 1/4 of it, it cost you 1/4 of $2.50 to make that stew. That's your celery cost. So if you think about it, and I'm a very mathy business analyst type of a brain person, so I think in these terms. I know a lot of people don't, but stop sometime, sit down, do the math, and you'll realize that it's so much cheaper to eat at home, especially if you learn some recipes and some food stretching recipes, like I would call them, on how far your dollars can go. So I'll give you an example of something that I do, and this is my example, and I can post the recipe. So I don't do it regularly, but once in a while I will. I'll go buy a whole chicken. And a whole chicken is, even the organic, is something like $11 for an entire huge chicken. Okay, I get that chicken and I'll bake it in the oven. And then with that leftover chicken, I'll take that baked chicken after I've gotten rid of a lot of that fat, and I'll boil it in a big pot of water. And I'll boil it down and I'll make a chicken broth. To that chicken broth, I will add my celery, onions, carrots, peas, couple of seasonings, some bay leaf, some parsley, some poultry seasoning, whatever, inexpensive ingredients because you're just using a pinch. Boil it down in a pot, boil it, boil it, boil it. You now have chicken soup, okay? You can save half of that chicken soup, okay, that you've broken apart the chicken now. You've taken it out, you've let it cool down, you break it down. You now have a big, huge pot of chicken soup. With that chicken soup, you can take some of that chicken and take it out and make a little side salad or a side vegetable, another very inexpensive meal. You can also then have one night where you make noodles separately, and now you can scoop out some of that soup, the soup ingredients, and pour it over the noodles. You now have chicken soup. You can also take that big pot of chicken soup and take half of it with the chicken and the vegetables and put it in a separate pot, and the broth, half of it. And you're going to boil that down, boil it down, boil it down, boil it down. Add 2 tablespoons of flour. You now have the inside makings of chicken pot pie. So now I've taken that one meal, that one bird, and I've turned it into chicken dinner. I've turned it into chicken soup, and now I've also turned it into chicken pot pie. Okay, and all I have to do is get some flour, and I learned how to do this last year. I make an amazing pie crust now. I never used to be able to, but I took a class and I learned how to do it, and my pie crust is amazing. So a little bit of butter, a little bit of Crisco, some flour, and some ice water. Whip up your own pie crust. It doesn't take that long, believe it or not. It's mostly cooling in the refrigerator most of the time while this is all cooking and boiling on a simmer, and you can go do other stuff. So, you're not married to the kitchen. You can just put it there, either slow cook it, or you can do it on the stove top, whatever, but you now have taken that one entree, so to speak, that chicken, and you've turned that $25 maybe max of ingredients into a chicken entree. You've also turned it into chicken soup, and you've also turned it into chicken pot pie. Okay, you can then even take some of those vegetables that are in the soup, strain them out, take the chicken out of there as well, grind that in your food processor with some breadcrumbs and some egg and some cayenne pepper and some garlic powder, and make chicken croquettes. So we're up to 4 meals. We're up to 4 meals now out of that initial purchase of $25. So anybody out there that tells you that eating out is cheaper than making your own food at home, they're crazy. Just tell them flat out that they're crazy and they're wrong, because there's no way that you could get that many meals from an initial $25 investment at a restaurant. There's no way. It wouldn't happen. Um, just knowing a little bit about restaurants, having been in that business, having worked in that business when I first moved to Florida, I can tell you that just being mindful of this kind of stuff, just knowing this, because my dad owned restaurants. And my dad used to even always say, there's nothing cheaper for a restaurant to make than pasta. Pasta and rice and pizza and things like that are like, they're carb meals. You know, you think of the price of a box of pasta. $2, what is it, $1.98, $2, something like that. These are all ballpark numbers, by the way, but you can get at least 4 servings out of that one thing. So when you go to a restaurant and you pay $18 or $20, $25 for a spaghetti and meatball plate, you've got 2 meatballs, probably, maybe 3, okay, that are probably at least 1/3. Let's be conservative and say 1/3 breadcrumbs, okay, and egg and parsley, and probably not necessarily the highest quality meat, okay? But you could use high quality meat, make those 3 meatballs, and your plate of pasta, which your food cost to make that plate of pasta is probably around 45 to 50 cents for just the plate of the pasta alone on one meal. So what are we up to? Are we up to maybe your personal from scratch food cost for that plate of spaghetti and meatballs being up to $2.50, maybe? So you can see, just by thinking about that and doing the math, I love that phrase, do the math, because, you know, I forget what show I was watching the other night about some guy saying that he prefers numbers to people. I think it was The Crown. Yes, The Crown. He prefers numbers to people because numbers don't lie. People do. I love that saying. And numbers they're honest. It's true. You know, the numbers don't lie. If it's $1.80, if it's $1.88 for a box of pasta, and you can make 4 plates of pasta out of that, your pasta cost alone is whatever $1.88 is divided by 4. So think about it, you know. So the whole point I'm trying to make here, without turning Mindfulness with Mark Bianchi into a cooking show, the whole point I'm trying to make here is stop and think about and analyze all of the different ways money goes out the door in your household. Because if you really inspect it and you really sit down and you think about, you do one column, this is my income. You do another column, this is my expenses. How many of those expenses do you have some form of control in? And where you don't even think you might have control, you do have control. I didn't even get to some of the frivolities, you know, and Lord knows I love to go to a coffee shop every once in a while. But if you're regularly, the only place you're getting coffee is like out at a coffee shop, you're way overpaying, because, you know, you can brew for, and I like my coffee strong, but I can still brew and make a cup of coffee for 1/5 probably the cost to make that cup of coffee that I'd pay if I bought it out. And, you know, I know that there's a price to be considered for, it's called, I think, opportunity cost, your cost of the labor, your own personal labor of making that cup of coffee, of making those meals at home. It's not as bad as you think. And with practice, you'd be surprised, you know, the cooking and all that. You set aside 4 hours of your day. I used to work with a lady who would always tell me she spent her Sundays doing all her cooking for the week. And she had a huge Tupperware collection, obviously. You would need that. But she would make, like, you know, 3 meals. They would just slow cook on the stove or in the oven all day on a Sunday for 3, 4, 5 hours. And then she would just take those meals and put them into the Tupperwares. And she had her lunch and her breakfast and her dinner. Well, maybe not breakfast, but, you know, with breakfast, you know, some people are breakfast eaters. I'm not a huge breakfast eater. I'm happy with a dish of cereal or whatever, so I don't have to have breakfast every day. But there's no saying you couldn't make an omelet, you know, or 2 omelets ahead of time. You might have to just make a slice of toast with it or something, you know, on that day, or have a granola bar with it or something or some piece of fruit. It's always healthy. But I would just say that, you know, making it ahead of time. You know, she was very organized, and I appreciate that, because not only is that a financial savings, it's just a nice organized way to prepare your food. You have it ready for you. And then talk about convenience. What's more convenient than coming home from work and taking your nice Tupperware that has your stew in it or your chicken pot pie that you made already and just sticking it in the microwave, you know, for 3 minutes and heating it up? What's more convenient than that? And you have a nice homemade from scratch meal that's good for you, that you know you didn't, only you know what you put in it, okay? And if you're not putting preservatives in it or artificial ingredients, it doesn't have those things, right? So you know the ingredients you put in them. So check that box off, okay, healthier. You also know that, yeah, you spent some time on Saturday or Sunday, a few hours of your time, but you're now prepared for the whole week. And now you have your evenings free when you come home. You don't have to bother cooking, you know, and maybe you live by yourself. Maybe you you have a family. So maybe you just need to buy more Tupperware, but it's a one-time investment, really. I mean, honestly, how often do we replace our Tupperware? So that's what I would say is, look at all these ways. There are so many ways right under your nose. If you do that expense sheet next to your income sheet, and show all your sources of income, job, investments, blah, 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 everything that comes in the door. Then do that column for your expenses, otherwise known as everything that goes out the door. You know, and that's those surprise events like those repair bills I talked about. That's those things like the home economics that I talked about, where you can really find ways. So if you look at all of those things individually, and you're not afraid to be a little bit adventurous, you're not afraid to use Google, you will find out that you are more in control than you think, and you can start the process of taking back your personal power with your money. And it starts with those simple things. It absolutely does start with those simple things. So with that, I hope that you have enjoyed today's show. As promised, I will post some of those recipe ideas, because I know on the Enlightened World Network, we have talked about food in the past with Mimi's Diner, very, very good show about how our eating and our self-image, you know, how it's all related. And Lord knows I've put on the COVID-20 and to squash a lot of the pain of this year, for lack of a better word. And so that's coming off, by the way. And I just think that anything that helps with our living, that helps with our peacefulness, helps with our management of money, it's all appropriate for the Enlightened World Network channel and the Enlightened Living channel. And I hope you enjoyed this today. And I hope that you will not be afraid in the future to Google and YouTube things, just to see, you know, test yourself and see what you're capable of doing. If you have faith in yourself, give it a try. If you don't. That would be my advice. Or get a trusted friend or family member who you do trust that, you know, knows how to cook, knows how to repair things and all that kind of stuff. For me, I wasn't afraid to try it. And more than 9 times out of 10, it worked out just fine. And I saved myself a ton of money. So with that, today's show will come to a close. I hope that you have enjoyed it. And I look forward to seeing all of you on these shows every 2 weeks. I am on Mindfulness with Mark Bianchi is on the Enlightened World Network and the Enlightened Living channels every second Wednesday at 12 o'clock noon Eastern Standard Time. If you want to reach me, I am a financial coach, and I work with budgets. I work with monitoring people trying to change their money behaviors. Before, the ideal time is always before going to see a financial advisor or a financial planner that you verify is certified. You can come see a financial coach like me before you go to see those people, those certified investment type planner people. But for me, I can help you get to a point where, you know, you are putting money aside, you are addressing these behaviors like cooking and things like that, or, you know, are you giving these things a try? That's what a financial coach does. They try to change your behaviors regarding money so you can get to a point where now you're ready to go see an investment advisor. So with that said, if you'd like to contact me, I have a Facebook web. You can go to my Mark Bianchi, Google me on I'm sorry, Facebook search me. The business name is Mindful Money Matters LLC. You can check me out there. Also, my email, my direct email, is on the Mindful Money Matters LLC Facebook business page. However, if you want to contact me directly by email, I can be reached at financial.coach.mark@gmail.com. And I look forward to seeing you, and I hope you've enjoyed today's show. I look forward to seeing you on 2 Wednesdays from now at noon. Bye-bye. Thank you.